Welcome to another edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. We have reached the CFL Grey Cup playoffs. Regular season is in the past, and we are ready to talk Grey Cup playoffs. And it is here. Division semifinals, East and West this weekend. Of course, Saskatchewan awaiting the winner in the West final, and my Hamilton Tiger Cats awaiting the winner of this weekend's Winnipeg-Montreal game in the East final. Excited to break it down. We've got our quarterback, back in the house, Will Arndt, to help us break down division semifinal weekend. Will, how are things, and how excited are you for the playoffs? Grey Cup playoffs are here.
Best time of the year. I was just telling Ian here, I was getting fired up, reading about it, kind of feeling the chill in the air, talking about the main guys, and, it is here. It's an exciting weekend. Got some great football ahead of us. For the most part, the teams are healthy. I think everyone feels good about the matchups. I don't think anyone's looking at anything in this playoff picture about no, it's even, clean. Let's go get it.
Yeah, no question. And like I said, we've got Winnipeg and Montreal. Winnipeg crossing over from the West Division to the East side of the bracket for their matchup against Montreal. And then, of course, you've got Calgary and BC. Fitting that we have the two former quarterback battery mates, Vernon Adams and Nathan Rourke, now going head-to-head against one another for bragging rights in the West semifinal, with Calgary taking on BC. So let's get into it. We'll begin in the East semifinal. The start times have changed on Saturday for these two games slightly. They were supposed to be 3 p.m. Eastern for the Eastern semifinal, 6:30 p.m. Eastern for the West semifinal. But because of the prospects of a potential Game 7 of the World Series with the Toronto Blue Jays and the LA Dodgers, they are up. They're just moving the start times for both games up. So it'll be 2 p.m. Eastern for the East semifinal and 5:30 p.m. Eastern time for the West semifinal. But we have Winnipeg and Montreal here in the East semi. Montreal 5.5-point home favorites, 49.5 the total here in this game. I think one of the things that stands out about Montreal is you need to break down their individual games that they have played this season in bunches, in portions, because there's going to be times this year where Montreal looked like and played like one of the most dominant teams in the CFL. And then there were times this year that they looked like a shell of themselves. And there was a time in the year where they didn't have Davis Alexander, who is, it's not even fair to talk about the difference he makes compared to McLeod Bethel Thompson and James Morgan and any of the other quarterbacks who really struggled when Davis Alexander wasn't around to play for Montreal. And then they went through that little midsection of the season, right in the middle part of the regular season, where they were just decimated with injuries. Both sides of the football, the receiving core was banged up beyond belief, and that really negatively impacted this Alouettes team. And we saw the difference in the way this team performed, with those injuries versus when they were healthy, and obviously also the difference between their offense between when Bethel Thompson and Morgan played and then when Davis Alexander played for them. And again, you can correlate the season really to everything that went down, just as I said. They started off the year with 3 straight wins. Davis Alexander was at quarterback in those games. He goes down to injury after they beat Edmonton in week 3. McLeod Bethel Thompson takes over. They lose 2 in a row against BC and Hamilton. Davis Alexander comes back against Toronto. They win that game 26-25, but he re-aggravates that injury, and he goes down at the end of that game, and then he's out for a significant period of time. Now, they did win the first game after Alexander got hurt against Toronto with that win at Calgary. Probably the best win they've had without Davis Alexander this year. Probably the only great win they've had without Davis Alexander this year. And then they went on that swoon. 5 straight losses, all with no Davis Alexander. James Morgan played in a couple of those games, and he just wasn't ready. He just wasn't ready to be a starting quarterback. And then, of course, they got Davis Alexander. Actually, they had a good performance by Bethel Thompson when they beat Saskatchewan, 48-31. And then they had a 21-19 win against Toronto, again with MBT, but MBT was not good in that game. Jarrett Dagey was worse for the Argos, and the Alouettes won that game. And then they get Davis Alexander back at home against Calgary late September, and then with him back, 38 points against Calgary, 30 against Ottawa, 39 against Ottawa. They win all 3 of those games. he is one of the best quarterbacks in the CFL right now. To me, there's no argument about that. And now that he's healthy, it could be trouble for a Winnipeg team, in my opinion. We know the pedigree. We know Mike O'Shea, Zach Collaros, and there's still a core in this team. Stanley Bryant, the left tackle. They've been here a long time. They know how to turn it up and win at this time of year. And there's always that little thought in the back of your mind, Will, that, as much as there's been inconsistency with the Blue Bombers this year, that this is still a team that knows how to win when the month calendar turns to November, and the playoffs arrive. So I wouldn't totally put it past them, but you look again with some of these results here for the Winnipeg Blue Bombers down the stretch, and the way they performed in certain games, there are still some concerns here, in my opinion, with what we saw late in the year from Winnipeg. They got beaten twice by Saskatchewan. The back-to-back games, Labor Day Classic, and then the Banjo Bowl right after that. They had Strevler at quarterback, but they lost to Hamilton. They beat Hamilton 40-3, maybe their best win down the stretch. But other than that, a mediocre performance and a narrow win against a horrible Ottawa team that obviously we'll talk about that a little bit later about what happened with Bob Dice. Obviously, we've kind of figured, he'd be relieved of his duties. That did happen. We'll get Will's thoughts on that toward the end of the show. But they got that win against Ottawa. But then down the stretch, I mean, the Saskatchewan game where they just barely survived 17-16 against a Riders team that was resting everybody after clinching the West Division. Zach Collaros was not sharp in that game. They nearly lost that game outright, hung on for a 17-16 win. They had another Zach Collaros struggle of a game defense as well against Edmonton the week before, where they lost 25-20 to the Elks. Don't be fooled by the final score. Winnipeg made that closer than it really was at the end. So, the two games that meant something, forget the Montreal game last week, because that was like an exhibition game for both teams. But the two games that really meant something, Winnipeg struggled, has not played well. Now they got to go on the road. We know at times on the road they're more vulnerable. They have a great home field advantage. But you look at this Winnipeg team away from home, and it was a struggle for them. They lost at Calgary, didn't cover. They lost at Toronto, didn't cover. They lost at Calgary again. They beat Montreal, but there was no Davis Alexander at that time on the road. They lose to Saskatchewan on the road. They lose to Hamilton on the road. Okay, they beat Ottawa on the road, big deal, and then they lose to Edmonton. So this team's track record this season on the road is very sketchy. And now they roll into Percival Molson against a Montreal team that's as healthy as they've been all year. Davis at quarterback. The more I watch Zach, I don't want to say Father Time, is catching up to him, because I think he's still capable of bringing a great performance, at times. But I've seen more mistakes. I've seen more accuracy issues, inaccuracy with the football, and more decision-making issues. But the interception numbers have increased this year for Zach Collaros. The one thing you can say about Montreal is there's some ball hawks back there in their secondary. Dequoy at the safety spot, Sutton. There's guys that can defend the pass and make you pay for forcing the football. And we've started to see more of that in Zach Collaros here down the stretch, just forcing things a little bit. So I worry about this matchup. Look, if you're going to think about betting against Winnipeg at this stage of the season, you're always worried that they flip the switch and they look great again in the playoffs, because often they've been able to do that. They've been able to flip the switch and find a way. I just don't know if this is that same group. I really don't. I think they have shown way more inconsistency, way more volatility in their week-to-week performances. I don't think this defense is particularly good, because I think every time they've played a competent offense, throw out the Saskatchewan game because Jake Mayer was at quarterback, but look what Fajardo and Edmonton did. Justin Rankin ran the football down their throat, and they moved the football, put up 25 points. And when they faced really good offenses this year, they've been shredded in some games. Trevor Harris has had big games against this Winnipeg team earlier in the season. We saw Calgary put up big numbers and points. Vernon Adams against this team. So when they've played playoff caliber teams, playoff caliber offenses, playoff caliber quarterbacks, this Winnipeg defense has been shredded, in a lot of these games. So I like Montreal to win this game. I'm not going to lay the 5.5, but I'm going to go the team total route, which is right now 27.5 with Montreal. I think they're a 28-plus points scoring team in this game. They're very capable of it. And you go back and look at the season results for Montreal with Davis Alexander at quarterback for the Alouettes. It's amazing how many times they've been able to get to the 30s, as far as points scored. In fact, they've been very good at being able to do that. I'm just looking at Montreal's past statistics from this season. Yeah, I mean, they have been a team that's been able to get to that 28, 30 point plateau often this season when they've had a healthy Davis Alexander at quarterback for them. So that's what I'm looking at here. I like Montreal, but I'm going to target the team total here over 27.5. I mean, I lean to the land, the 5.5, but I prefer the team total a little bit over. I think this Winnipeg defense secondary is concerning. We've seen Willie Jefferson's pass rush numbers decline this year. He's still good at getting his hands up, breaking up passes when he can't get to the quarterback. But still, we've seen Willie Jefferson's just his ability to get home kind of not be as strong as it's been in recent years. And another thing, too, is if you're going to pass rush Davis Alexander, he's got the ability to escape it, be elusive. And then if he's able to bootleg or roll out to his left or right, he's as dangerous as it gets throwing the football from that position. So I think this is where the end of the road here for Winnipeg. Not only the end of the road for their season, but if they lose this game, which I think they will, there's going to be some tough decisions coming up because this feels like a team where their Grey Cup dynasty window is starting to shrink. It's starting to close. Will it close completely should they falter here on Sunday against Montreal, which I think they will? I'm on the Alouettes here, team total over 27.5. Will, what do you think here, East semifinal?
Yeah. To me, after doing some homework on this game, it's such a game of dichotomies. Davis Alexander's never played in a playoff game, and it is a little bit different. Zach Collaros and this Winnipeg team, while, they've had this dynastic run over the last 5+ years, I've found it very surprising that, Zach Collaros has only started 8 playoff football games, which is really not all that much, which kind of goes to show like this team has been dominant in the West with a bye week. And this is their first time going on the road and being a crossover team in all of that time. So they're in a little bit of uncharted territories. It's just been a weird year for Winnipeg. Somehow, as ugly as it's been for Chris Streveler, having a 4-1 record in games that he started, and for Zach Collaros to have a losing record in the games that he started for this team is just weird. I will give Winnipeg credit. You mentioned the team total for Montreal, 28 points. Winnipeg hasn't let up more than 25 points in a game since early September. So we talked early in the season, thinking back on previous episodes, about how bad this Winnipeg team was defensively. They've kind of settled in a little bit where it's respectable. And, I do think there's something about Chris Streveler being out this game. That's an element to this offense when you're in a must-win game where, like, you can have him in on packages and some runs now that it's colder and some things that you're doing in the sneak game where he's, been very viable for them. It does, I think, hurt to lose him last week, despite, Zach Collaros being obviously your franchise quarterback. And then there was this part that was really hard for me. Zach Collaros is 7-1 in his 8 career playoff starts. It's freaking unbelievable, right? And you want to lean on the experience that this organization has had. And, Brady Oliveira and colder weather and playoff football and how that works in their favor. But then I just can't get over the fact that Davis Alexander hasn't lost a game that he started. Just really hard to get over. And there's no reason for them not to hit on, all the cylinders that they can because, for the most part, they're healthy. They're at home. They got a chance to rest their guys. They got a chance to see Winnipeg last week. So, I like Montreal to win, but 5.5 for a playoff football game versus a prideful, dynastic, Winnipeg team, I think is too much to lay down.
Yeah, I mean, because I could see this being 28-24, Montreal, but I win the team total, but they don't cover 5.5. I mean, that's exactly what I thought of when I said I want to back Montreal here in some form, but maybe I go team total instead. You're right about the Winnipeg defense and that they haven't given up 28 very often, but I'll argue they faced a bunch of really weak offenses in comparison during that span compared to what they're going to face here with Montreal and what Davis Alexander and a healthy receiving core. This receiving core, when healthy, I mean, my goodness, we know how good it can be. It's deep. I said coming into the season, this is a Montreal receiving core that's deeper than I've seen in quite some time with Mack and with Philpott, with Speaker, and you go on down. There's just so many different. And what if Rambo gets going? You've got tons of weapons here. Sneed, how great has Tyler Sneed been for this Montreal team and the connection he's found with Davis Alexander? So, and now Nick Dembski may not play for Winnipeg, and he has been such a critical piece to that receiving core. Missed the last two regular season games, and he's no sure thing to return here for this game against the Montreal Alouettes. So we'll have to. That's definitely someone's status that you're going to want to keep an eye on here going into that game on Sunday. All right, West semifinal: Calgary Stampeders and BC Lions. We've got BC 5-point home favorites, 53.5 the total here in this game. This is a matchup BC has owned this season. They played Calgary twice, and they beat Calgary twice, both by double digits, 52-23 in Calgary. Outright as a 6-point dog, 38-24. BC in the rematch here at BC Place Stadium, laying 3.5. The common denominator in those two games, 75 points in the first meeting, 62 points in the second meeting. This total at 53. I know defenses turn it up at this time of year, but we're indoors, the cozy indoor confines of BC Place Stadium. I think this game's going over the total here, 53.5. That's what I like most of all. Here's the thing with BC has been excellent. And Nathan Rourke, we know, has been down the stretch. I would say this has probably been for Rourke since like August, around that time when he started to really ramp this run together. I mean, yeah, it was basically, early August or even late July. 33 against Hamilton in a loss, but he played well. 41 against Hamilton in the rematch when they beat us here in Hamilton. 36 against Montreal. Even in two losses, Ottawa, Toronto, BC and Nathan Rourke's offense scored 34 and 33 in those games. 38 against Ottawa, the 52 against Calgary in September, 27 against Toronto at home, 38 again against Calgary, 37 against Edmonton. You throw out last week's game because it was like a exhibition game against Saskatchewan. I mean, they're getting 30 points every week, just about, from the end of July. That's what this BC offense has been able to do. So it's hard to envision Calgary's defense, which started the season playing great. Bob Slowick, the defensive coordinator, and this defense was flying to the football, getting to the quarterback. They were stopping the run pretty decently. The secondary was holding up. That has not been the case as much for Calgary here down the stretch. I mean, we have seen this defense definitely tail off, definitely decline in the back half of the season and not play as well. We saw Hamilton, score 42 points against. We saw big points given. Hamilton lost that game 42-20, but before that, BC put up the 32 points against them, 37 allowed to Saskatchewan. Davis Alexander and the Montreal Alouettes, what did they score? 37-38 against this Calgary defense as well. Recently, when Davis Alexander came back, hasn't been the same Calgary defense, just hasn't. So it's probably going to be an onus on, especially with how this Lions offense has been rolling, and it's impressive because we thought when they lost a couple of the receivers a couple of years ago that maybe this receiving core would stumble, but no. Justin McGinnis, Aiden Eberhardt, Barry Hill, Javon Katoy, there's Keon Hatcher. I mean, there's still plenty of great weapons to go around. James Butler, in the backfield. The offensive line, I think, has gotten better for BC. BC's defense, which was terrible for a good chunk of the season, absolutely awful, to the point where people wanted Mike Benavides' head on a silver platter. I will say this, they've played a little bit better down the stretch, but this is a BC defense that is still not great. They do still give up points. And when I'm saying better, they've gone from basically giving up 30, 40, 50 points a game to giving up, still giving up, 22, 24, in the few games here down the stretch, which still isn't great, but it's at least been better. But you're facing a Calgary team that's got potency, that's got, it started to get healthier at receiver, where they were really banged up down the stretch. And you have a quarterback in Vernon Adams here in BC, knowing he did not play his best football in those 2 losses against BC. Now, the defense was terrible in those games for Calgary. That's also why they lost those games to BC. But Vernon Adams did not play well. He was throwing interceptions. He was leaving points on the field. They were not finishing drives with touchdowns. And all of that got Vernon in trouble in the 2 head-to-head losses against BC. I think there's plenty of room for improvement for him to have a better game here. And he'll certainly be amped up because Vernon knows in this whole dilemma in the offseason, keeping Nathan Rourke, BC decided obviously to go that route and part ways with Vernon, let him walk. He knows, Will, that one win on Saturday here against BC wipes away those 2 losses that he suffered against the Lions earlier this season. It does, because one playoff win matters more than 2 regular season losses to this BC Lions team. You get them in the playoffs, who the hell cares that you went 0-2 against the BC Lions in the regular season? So I think Vernon will step up. I think he'll play, his best game that he has played. I just can't imagine a quarterback coach dynamic on paper that's as strong from an offensive mind standpoint as VA and Dave Dickinson, not throwing some wrinkles out there, not making adjustments to find out how we can better execute offensively this time around against, in my opinion, still a shaky BC defense compared to the way they played the first 2 times. That being said, I do still expect Nathan Rourke and the Lions offense to chug along, put up their points, which they just do. It seems like that whenever they hit the field, unless they're going to turn the ball over a ton of times, they're going to be good for at least 28 points because that's consistently the way it has been for this BC Lions offense really since the end of July for the most part. So I like over 53.5. That's my strongest opinion on this game. Strongest bet will be that full game over 53.5. Weather won't be a problem indoors, of course, at BC Place Stadium. I'm a little more torn on the side. Really don't want to step in front of BC with how well they've played. And Nathan Rourke, to me, has been sensational, and he's owned the matchup against Calgary. But something tells me Calgary's going to play their best game this season against BC, and they're going to be a pain in the neck. And because of that, I'm a little bit pumping the brakes here on laying the 5 points here with BC in this game. I think they win, but it would also not shock me to see it go down to the wire. What do you think here, Will? West semifinal, Calgary, BC.
Yeah, well, folks, for all you out there, if you're looking for a diversity on tape, you're not going to get it here. I think Ian and I see that the same way, which would tell you for a lot of this season, that's usually a pretty good telltale sign of what's to come. I also love the over here. I think this matchup will be competitive and close for all the reasons that you laid out between the quarterbacks and how well Calgary's coached. And I think if you went, player to player, I think Calgary's got some really nice young pieces and talent, and especially on the defensive side of the ball over the BC Lions. But I'm also not going to step in the way of Nathan Rourke, who I mentioned at the beginning of the season. I thought he was he was my pick to be the MLP. I think he's been, arguably the best, if not top 2 quarterback in the CFL for the last 2-3 months. And 5 points though, I don't know if I would step in the way of that, but I think there's gonna be a lot of points scored in this matchup. And let's see here. Yes, one of the things that I was just looking at was BC's injury report. I will say there was some players on there, and it might just be load management stuff or in the season, but Gary Peters, Butler, some guys on the offensive line, TJ Lee, those are guys that are on there. So I am curious to see how that kind of trends. If all of a sudden, a couple of those key pieces for them, are limited or DNP, I would start to maybe change my opinion. But I like BC. I don't like them by 5 points, but I love the over here.
No doubt. It should be a fun game. I think there's going to be points. I think the quarterback play is going to be absolutely outstanding. It's been outstanding really from the end of July from Nathan Rourke, pretty consistently. I mean, where's the bad game he's had, during the really bad game? Has he been off a little bit? Like there was that one game, Will, against Toronto when after they went to Calgary and they whooped on the Stamps. There was that one, they beat Calgary 52-23. They came back home and they played Toronto and they won 27-22. I don't think he was that sharp in that game, Nathan, but it wasn't a bad game. He just was a little off. They weren't quite in sync and dialed in like they had been. But you're nitpicking if you're looking to find that one horrific game from Nathan Rourke, because you can't find it,
Right.
really, from the end of July.
Yeah, and with VA, you're going to get some stinkers. I think that's just kind of the player that he is. But at the same time, dynamic gamer, wouldn't count him out in this scenario, especially when he's kind of been punked, 2 games in a row. So I think he's got something to prove. I think Dickey will get him ready in terms of putting him in the right spots. I think he's going to go out there and cut it loose. I don't think he'll shy to the challenge. But hey, listen, take out the analysis. This is going to be a great football game. I think there's going to be a really good product and a really competitive game.
Yeah, you always say it's individual, it's case by case with the matchups. I know there's some people that say when it's 2 teams playing each other and the one team beat the other team twice, some people say, well, it's hard to win 3 straight times against the same team. Yes, but I have seen it happen.
Yeah.
So you can't just say, well, you got to bet Calgary because you can't beat the same team 3 times in a row in a single season. No, it's happened before. So like I said, it's tough. Nathan Rourke is playing too well. The offense is playing too well. And earlier in the season, I'd be reluctant to lay points with BC at home. But, down the stretch, we did see BC win by double digits against Edmonton, and they won by double digits against this very Calgary team, as home favorites, 38-24. So I just don't want to step in front of Rourke. He's played like the best quarterback, certainly one of, in the CFL since late July.
On that note, I'm curious, as a Hamilton guy, who's your MLP for this season? I mean, Bo's had an incredible year, and he's put up amazing stats.
He's done it against some. The problem is with that, and Bo has had a good year, but a lot of the 11 wins for Hamilton, I've said this already, came against weaker teams. A lot of Ottawa, a lot of Toronto, a lot of teams playing with backup quarterbacks. We beat Winnipeg with Strevler, not Kolaros. We beat Montreal with Bethel Thompson and Morgan, not with Davis Alexander. We got swept by Saskatchewan. We got swept by Calgary. And then a lot of our wins, like I said, were Toronto, Ottawa, and teams with backup quarterbacks. So, I mean, that's the problem. I think we feasted on the weak a good chunk of our season. But he has had a good season. I would pick Rourke. Rourke's my pick.
Any thought on Trevor Harris?
And he's my guy. I love that guy.
Oh, of course.
Of course. He's been on this show a bunch of times. He's going to be on again in January when we get into the NFL playoffs. But, yeah, he's in the running too. I don't think he's played, in all honesty, and I got to be honest, I can't just say I pick him because he's a buddy. But he has not been nearly as crisp here in this last few weeks that I've seen him play. There's been a few more erratic throws, a couple more interceptions. Obviously, he's still had an overall outstanding season, and he stayed largely healthy for most of it, which is great to see. He definitely deserves consideration, but I would give it to Nathan Rourke. I would have given it to Davis Alexander if he played all season. I think Davis would have gotten it, hands down, if he had not been injured and missed so much time and so many games this year.
Yeah, I mean, going back to what I said earlier, it's unbelievable the fact that the kid hasn't started and lost yet.
Yeah.
So
missing time, and he comes right back in. And what did he do against Calgary when he came right back in after being out for so long with 38 points or whatever against the Stampeders? So yeah, like I said, a lot of good seasons from Rourke and Mitchell, and obviously Davis Alexander. They've had good seasons overall, really good seasons for their respective teams. And so, like I said, tough choice, but I would go with Nathan Rourke if I had to in the MOP discussion in the CFL. Great stuff, Will. Great analysis. Great chat, as always, talking about the division semifinals. Thanks to everyone watching. Hit the like button before we wrap things up. And we are going to wrap things up now with our CFL division semifinal best bets. Will, we'll start with you. What do you like for best bet for this weekend?
Yeah, so as someone that played in the CFL and coached in the CFL, there is something very refreshing about walking into BC Place. You got the roof covered, and it's the turf, and you're kind of feeling the ball spin indoors, where you feel like we're just going to be able to have some production, and we can play football the way we want to as we get into this colder, less or inclement time of the year. So, as we referenced earlier, because I feel a lot of conviction about it, my best bet of the week is going to be that BC and Calgary over. Ian, what's the number? It's like 52.5.
53.5.
53.5.
Yep.
Let's go. Come on. Let's score some points. Let's throw it around. Let's get that double full stripe, whipping around the building and throwing some touchdowns.
Yeah, I do. I think it's a high-scoring affair there with Calgary and BC as well. So Calgary, BC, West semifinal, over 53.5 for Will Arndt with his division semifinal best bet. Mine, it was going to be either that or the other game. I'll go the other game just to be different, but I like it just as much. I think the Alouettes, I'm going to trust them to get me 4 touchdowns or 28 points against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. You look at Davis Alexander this year and this Montreal offense, scoring points has not been an issue. Majority of the games with Davis Alexander starting, this team has been able to get to 28 or more points on a very consistent basis. I know the Winnipeg defense still can be capable, but I don't think this is the stop unit that I trust against the best, healthiest offenses. And Montreal's as healthy as they've been all year, especially on the offensive side of the football. And I think at home against still a very leaky Winnipeg secondary, Alexander and this receiving core is going to do damage. So give me Montreal team total over 27.5 for my best bet here for divisional semifinal Saturday here in the CFL Grey Cup playoffs. Note that the games are Saturday for the division semifinals this weekend and the division finals next weekend. They've moved those to Saturday. The Grey Cup is still Sunday in a few weeks, but the division semis and the division final are now Saturdays, and that started last year. So make sure you're aware of that. Great show as always with Will. Will, great stuff. Anything you want to add before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I will give, if you're okay, just a quick 2 minutes on Bob Dice and the Ottawa Red Blacks.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was the big news. I did want to hit on that. Ottawa obviously parting ways with Bob Dice, and we expected that. The season just turned into quite frankly, an unmitigated disaster. I mean, there was all kinds of issues. The quarterback injuries, defense was terrible pretty much all season, especially later in the year. And even Drew Brown deserves some blame because he threw way too many interceptions later in the year. And he ended up, and at the end of the year, it was just, exhibition. They were eliminated. They had to give Dustin Crum a look. They had to give Tyree Adams a look at quarterback. And at the end of the day, it's just, you knew he was going to pay the price for it at a season like this that just was so disappointing considering they were a team that made the playoffs last year. Didn't win a playoff game, but I'm sure they would have taken last year's season, making the playoffs at least, compared to this year where just everything that could go wrong did go wrong. So what I know about Bob Dice is, do I think he is the greatest CFL coach? No, I think he's made some mistakes. He's made some blunders. Timeout management, game management has left a lot to be desired in my mind. But as far as a human being goes, as far as a man goes and a person, as good as it gets, the universal thought from everyone I've heard and spoken with has said Bob Dice is as good a person as you could ever find. But at the end of the day, it's a results-oriented business. You got to have winning product on the field. You got to coach up a winning football team. He just wasn't able to do it.
Yeah. For me personally, and I couldn't agree more, it's a results-oriented business. It makes me sad in a sense because, Ottawa was where I spent the majority of my time in the CFL, both playing and coaching. And it's kind of a demarcation of kind of an end of an era there. Unfortunately, the organization's really struggled since 2018 amid all the changes that happened then. But Bob Dice has been one of the few constants in that building since I think he's an OG Red Black. And, I've a lot of memories in my head of, walking in as a rookie and seeing his Harley by the door. And, when I was coaching there,
He's a motorcycle guy. How about that? I did not know that.
That's like his thing. And, as a coach, I shared the office next to him. So I shared the wall with him and, walking by and popping my head in. And he was always a guy that, while I was usually probably the last guy to leave the building, just because I didn't have a family or anything to go back to when I was coaching. But he was there before me every morning, and he was there a lot, and he put in work, and his players loved him, which I think is probably the best thing you could want someone to say about your performance as a coach, let alone the wins and the losses. And Yeah,
Make no mistake about it. This is not a we quit on the coach. We hate the coach situation here with Ottawa. This is just, unfortunately, look, we just weren't good enough this year as a team to win games.
Yeah, and I honestly I really don't know. I mean, I have some thoughts about the quarterback situation, what they chose to do there, but it's been puzzling. It's been a lot of different cracks at it now since 2019. A lot of different head coaches, some coordinators, bringing Rick Campbell back into the building and trying different quarterbacks, and then you have quarterbacks that weren't good there that leave and go do decent in other places. So it's been a tough time for the organization, but gosh, I hope they figure it out just because it's it's a great city, it's a great football town. So, anyways, I wanted to give a tip of the cap to Bob Dice and just the respect I had for him, the involvement that he's had in my personal football journey, and how I know guys played for and felt about him. If there's any silver lining in it for him, that would be something I would appreciate as a coach.
Well said. Well said. And you know what? I'm glad I don't have to rip and criticize Bob Dice on this show anymore. That's the one thing I will say, because I did, obviously, with some of the stuff going on the field, because certainly from a off the field standpoint, as a person and his character, there's nothing to rip, nothing to criticize. Absolutely a heart of gold from everyone that's been around him. So I would certainly wish him well in the future, no question. And great insight. As someone that was in the room, he's like, Will was in the room for a couple of years there in Ottawa, and Bob Dice was on the staff still at that time.
Yep.
This was long before he became the head coach after our guy got let go there. That's the sound of La Police. Whoop, whoop. That's the sound of the beast. He got let go there, Paul La Police, and then Bob Dice took over. But like I said, great man. Everyone has said that about him. It's, like I said, it's always unfortunate when it doesn't work out. But I think change was needed, and it'll be interesting to see where Ottawa goes as far as choosing their next head coach for the Red Blacks and that football team. There you go. That's a great way to end. Great segue. Great stuff, Will. A great show as always. Again, division semifinals. We'll be back next week to talk division finals. My Ticats are back in action, waiting the winner of Winnipeg versus Montreal. Saskatchewan awaiting the winner, of course, of BC Calgary. So looking forward to that. These should be two interesting games this weekend, though, for sure. I'm excited about it and looking forward to the games that count, games that matter the most, I should say, now getting underway this weekend in the CFL with the beginning of the CFL Grey Cup playoffs. So make sure you hit the like button on the way out. For Will Arndt, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been your CFL Division Semifinal Preview Edition of Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy. Enjoy the games and good luck. We will see you again next week as we tee up the CFL Division Finals right here on Ian Cameron's Football Frenzy.